Wasatihala Ikata Rafnar with you all health. I am Rafnar, or Raven, whichever you prefer. And in this episode of Mimir's Well, I am going to show how I sterilize the insides of drinking horns. So, I have the drinking horn. I have two drinking horns right here. This is my personal one. This is one I'm working on. My personal drinking horn has a beeswax seal on the inside. This one doesn't. This one is actually raw. It's unsealed. This is actually a raw horn. I have carved it and sanded it and polished it, but I haven't actually done anything to the inside of the horn. So it is a raw horn. Now, normally I add in cedar to my mix. I boil cedar. I basically use cedar tea normally. Given my current circumstances, I don't have any cedar right now, but straight up water will work. I also will often add sea salt, but I will explain that another time. The cedar helps because in theory it helps, because it is believed to have antiseptic and antibacterial qualities. It is believed to help. So don't take my word for it, But straight up water by itself is sufficient. I'm going to boil this. Now, while that water is boiling, I'm going to talk about the beeswax seal. So, drinking horns are often sealed with beeswax. If people don't seal them with beeswax, people will often seal them with a modern material like a food-grade epoxy resin, or they will be unsealed. Most of my drinking horns I actually don't seal. Now, the point of a seal is to give more longevity to the drinking horn. That is the actual point. Because horns are absorbent. They're a lot like wood. They are organic and they're absorbent. And by the way, they're not bone. Just to be clear, that's a question people often ask me. Horn is not bone. Horn is horn. But they're absorbent, and so they will absorb to a degree moisture. Anytime that you put a liquid inside a drinking horn, it'll absorb just a tad bit of it, a certain amount of it. Not massive amounts, but it will absorb it to some degree. And that's if your horn is unsealed. And so if your horn is unsealed, and if you don't thoroughly dry it out after using it, it will absorb that moisture. And over time, that moisture can build up and it can cause problems. It can cause rot. It can cause a stench. It can cause a bad taste. It can cause the buildup of bacteria, and it's insanitary. It's not good. It can cause the horn to degrade. It can cause the horn to come apart. So it's not good for the horn. And so one of the reasons why people often will seal the inside of a horn and the outside is to preserve the horn. It's for the well-being and the health of the horn. However, you don't have to do that. In my experience, if you don't have the horn sealed and if you are just thorough with it, you just make sure that you clean and dry it thoroughly after each use, a horn will last a good long time. So you don't have to do that. There are pros and cons to doing the beeswax seal. And in my opinion, honestly, it's 50-50, and it really just boils down to your personal preference. I would say that if you're not a super thorough person, if you're not super great at, keeping up on things, like for instance, making sure every time after you use the horn to thoroughly rinse and clean and dry it, then I would suggest sealing the horn. There's nothing wrong with being that way. Everybody's different, do what is more suited to you. So one of the plus sides, one of the pros is that you don't have to be as thorough with the horn. You can chillax a bit if you have a seal on the inside of the horn, whether it's beeswax or otherwise. You don't have to clean the horn as often in general if you have a beeswax seal in there. Usually I would say if you have a beeswax seal in there to just, boil the beeswax seal out once a week maybe. Some people say to boil it out every 3 months. I would say maybe once a week. Boil it out and put a new one in there at the most, that is. But really, just the main point is that every so often all you have to do is just boil out the old beeswax seal, and then just give the horn a good boil like I'm about to do now, and just clean it, dry it, and then put a new beeswax seal in there, and you're good to go until the next time you choose to do the routine. And that will take care of your drinking horn hygiene for the most part. Downsides to having a beeswax seal are, well, the fact that anytime that you put anything hot in there, it will degrade the seal. So, for instance, if you wanted to drink some tea out of your drinking horn, it will degrade that seal. If you wanted to drink some coffee out of your drinking horn, it'll degrade that seal. So that's one of the downsides. More or less, you can't really drink anything hot out of a drinking horn if it has a beeswax seal. But that's not really a big deal, to be honest, because most people don't actually drink hot things out of their drinking horns. People typically drink alcohol or water. I've been teaching people, though, that you can drink whatever you want out of a drinking horn. Because you can. You actually can drink pretty much whatever you want. Now, I will do more videos on seals later because there's actually quite a lot to go over. Usually, if people seal a horn, it's either, like I've been saying, with beeswax, which is traditional and, it's got some eco-friendly value to it, or they'll use a modern material, usually a food-grade epoxy resin. And one of the nice things about that epoxy resin is that it's permanent and you don't have to worry about it melting out, But like I said, I will go over seals later. Now, this drinking horn, as I said before, is raw and unsealed. So when I make drinking horns, I actually don't typically seal them. I usually don't do that. Usually, I will boil the insides like I'm doing on this one, and then after I've boiled the insides and sterilized them, I will cure them. Now, before I explain what curing is, I'm going to say really quick, since this video is mainly about showing people how to sterilize the inside of the horn, that you just need this hot water to sit in these horns for about 10 minutes. Nice, boiling, steaming hot water that will sterilize the inside of the horn. That will clean it. And again, like I was saying before, I actually normally like to use cedar in the hot water because cedar is believed to have antiseptic and antibacterial qualities. But even the hot water by itself will do a good enough job. So 10 minutes, and then after 10 minutes, you pour it out. And then I personally suggest that you rinse the inside of the horn afterwards with cold water to cool it off, and then let it dry thoroughly. Because like I was saying, horns are absorbent, moisture can be a problem, etc., etc. So, curing is where you take a high APV alcohol. APV stands for alcohol per volume. So you take a high APV alcohol, like a vodka or something like that, and you let it sit on the inside of the horn for a certain period of time. And what that does is the alcohol will actually do a deeper cleanse on the horn. In theory, what happens is it extracts toxins and things like that from the inside of the horn, and removes the stench, the natural horn stench, and removes the natural horn taste, and it just does a deeper cleanse on the horn. And it can also flavor the horn too. Now, people don't necessarily cure the horns for the sake of the cleansing. That's just a natural effect of it. That is how I think of it. So when I cure the horns, my main goal is the deeper cleansing. And according to my research, it is believed that more or less is what makes a horn food safe. Although, I think that it's safe enough after you've just done the boiling. It's just like I said, it does a deeper cleanse. And for me, also, the curing process has a spiritual element to it. I can explain later. But people will also cure their horns with lower APV alcohols too, because it's not always about the cleansing. People have suggested, I've read articles where people have suggested, to use a dark amber beer, for example, and that's more for the flavoring. I read one article, I don't remember where it was, but I read one article where a guy suggested maybe letting a dark amber beer sit in the horn for like 2 days to flavor it, So even the curing is not exactly an exact tradition, so to speak. It depends on your goal. Since my goal is more to cleanse the horns, I use a high APV alcohol. I use a vodka, and I let it sit for 7 days. That's just my thing. I'm a stickler for being really thorough, and so I just do it for 7 days. You can do it for 2 days or 3 days. It's up to you. But I will cure them for 7 days with a high APV alcohol because my main purpose is the cleansing. So yeah, that's what curing is. Now, I'm also going to make a point here as to how useful drinking horn stands are. Because when you're cleansing the inside of a horn with the hot water, it is very nice to have something to hold it. It can just sit there on your counter or on your table or wherever for 10 minutes and clean. It's very convenient. Yeah. So there you have it. I've gone over boiling out the inside of a drinking horn with a beeswax seal versus without a beeswax seal, and I've gone over the the basic procedure of doing this. It's actually pretty simple, really. Now, it doesn't actually have to be 10 minutes. Technically, you could do it for like 5 or 6 minutes, and that should be fine. I would say like 2 minutes or 3 minutes is probably not really sufficient, personally. But, it doesn't have to be 10 minutes. And again, it is my suggestion that afterwards you rinse it with nice cold water and you dry it thoroughly. Inside and out, because horns are absorbent on both the inside and the outside, and this raw horn